Moving on to 10.4, now we talk about multiplying real numbers. And the rule with multiplying and dividing actually is that if you have two, if you are multiplying or dividing the same sign, your answer will be positive. If your signs are different, your answer will be negative. So I guess in this case, being the same is positive, you can think of for multiplying and dividing. So for example, we know 3 times 4 is 12. It's positive times positive, we get a positive. So 12 times 6, and I can't remember if we've seen this notation in the notes before. I think we have, but note if you've got brackets there, that indicates the same thing as multiply. I could have written this. This could be 12 times 6, or you can use the dot. But if there's brackets with no operations, it just means multiplied. So this here is 12 times 6, and we get 72. 8 times 9 then gives us 72. Okay, if we have a negative number times a negative number, that also becomes a positive because they were the same sign, which is positive. So negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12. Negative 12 times negative 6, we get positive 72. Now we've got a fraction example. So remember with fractions, what do we do when we multiply? Numerator times numerator over denominator times denominator, or top times bottom times bottom. So we've got negative 2 times negative 6. So negative times negative gives us a positive 12. And then in the bottom, we've got 3 times 4, which gives us 12. So we end up with 12 over 12. Can we simplify that? Yes, we can. We can divide both of those by 12 for an answer of 1 over 1, which is just the whole number 1. Okay, if we've got a positive times a negative, we have unlike, and so we end up with a negative answer. So 4 times negative 7 gives us negative 28. 6 times negative 9 gives us negative 54. If we've got this fraction here on top, we're going to have 1 times negative 3, which gives us negative 3. And on the bottom, we're going to have 3 times 4, which gives us positive 12. And then we want to simplify this fraction. So here we can divide the top and the bottom by 3. And that would give us negative 1 over 4. So it's negative 1/4. Note, I can put the negative sign there, or I could put it in the middle like this. Both mean the same thing. Or if I wanted, I could even put it in the denominator like this. So all of those fractions are equivalent. They all mean the same thing. Okay, and then if we have a negative number times a positive number, again, they were unlike, and so we get a negative answer. So negative 7 times 8 gives us negative 56. Negative 12 times 6 gives us negative 72. Now we do a fraction one. So on top, we've got negative 5 times 4 gives us negative 20. And on the bottom, we have 7 times 5, which gives us positive 35. And then here we can simplify because both of those numbers divide by 5 to give us negative 4 over 7. Okay, a few properties that we know from before. The identity property states that anything we multiply by 1 gives us the same number. So any general number, if you imagine there's a general number here, x, it multiplied by 1 would be the same thing as 1 multiplied by x, which just gives you x. So with a more specific number, you can see the example there. 3 times 1 is the same thing as 1 times 3, which is 3. The property of 0, the multiplicative property of 0, says that anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So x times 0 is 0. 0 times x is 0. So we've got 4 times 0 is 0 times 4, which is 0. If you have 0 times 3/4, well, remember 0, you can think of it as 0 over 1. You would get 0 over 4, which is 0, because any number over any 0 over any number is 0. So any number, even a fraction multiplied by 0, always gives you 0. The inverse property says that any number multiplied by its inverse gives you 1. And this is a really important property later on. So we want to think about this a little bit. We're going to use this when we do division. So if we have x, some x, remember this is just a general number. We can think of this as x over 1, right? It could be a 5 over 1. You're going to multiply that by its reciprocal, which means you're going to flip the top and the bottom. And so x over 1 multiplied by its reciprocal, which is 1 over x, gives us 1. Okay, we could also write it as 1 over x times x. Remember, this x is like x over 1. Okay, if you have 4 over 1, then the reciprocal of 4 over 1, we're going to flip the top and the bottom, which will give us 1 over 4. So if you take the number and multiply it by its reciprocal, you end up with 1. Okay, and think about that. If you had this 4 over 1 times 1 over 4, if we do top times top, 4 times 1, we get 4. Bottom times bottom, we get 4. And then we can simplify this because the top and the bottom are both divisible by 4 to end up with 1 over 1, which is 1. So any number multiplied by its reciprocal is 1. And like I said, that can come in handy for division, also for algebra when we get to the algebra section in chapter 11. Okay, so if we were looking for the reciprocal of 6, then what would be the reciprocal of 6? Well, let's think of 6 as 6 over 1. Any whole number is that number over 1. And so the reciprocal is going to be 1 over 6. Okay, negative 4 then, well, you can think of it as negative 4 over 1. And so it's negative 1 over 4. Okay, or if you wanted, you could think of it as 1 over negative 4, or you could put the negative sign in the middle. Okay, 1 over 3 then, what would be the reciprocal? So we're going to flip the top and bottom. That gives us 3 over 1, which is the same thing as 3. Okay, I'm getting lazy in my boxes. There we go. Okay, and 3 over 4. So pause the video, see if you can find the reciprocal of 3 over 4. And for this last one, you're going to flip the top and the bottom. And so the reciprocal here will be 4 over